Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the death of the American blockbuster. I think it's very real. I think it's here. I think the Godzilla versus Kong it didn't even make 100 million domestic. We're done. It's counted over. Pandemic has shut down 75% of all movie theaters within 15 miles of my house. Right? There were four of them. Three of them are now closed. One's open. It's finished. I'm calling it. This, in my humble opinion, the death of the American blockbuster is here. It's dead now, right? And what I want to do is I want to do an autopsy. I want to talk about this, right? And today, what I want to do is I want to talk specifically about how bad this is going to hurt. It is absolutely catastrophic. So the pandemic came. And all of this is American specific. This is America's experience, okay? So in my opinion. So basically the pandemic came through and it reaped, man. Like it came in and it just reaped. And the first thing it did was it took a whole lot of people's lives, right? Now, that is the number one problem we had from the pandemic. Honestly, I will tell you right now, I do think that the death of the American blockbuster impacted me a lot worse than the loss of lives. And the reason why is I didn't know a single person who lost their life in the pandemic, right? So for me, the American blockbuster is the most deepest cut of the pandemic. But at the macro level, at the national level, the number one deep cut from the pandemic, the incredibly lasting damage of it is going to be the people whose lives were lost, and then the people who are alive, them dealing with that remorse and that sorrow and all of the fallout from the loss of a human life, an American human life, right? It's incredibly difficult, right? So that's number one. Number two is the death of the American blockbuster. It's huge. It is the second deepest cut delivered from the scythe-bearing reaper that the pandemic was. And here's the thing, I don't think people have any clue how bad this loss is going to be. It is going to be devastating. There were industries upon industries. There were no less than a dozen industries who had major money coming in from the American blockbuster. The American blockbuster just drove and generated so much profit and so much revenue for a dozen plus industries, not businesses, not companies, right? We're talking entire industries. It is staggering to think how deep this goes. It is just incredibly deep. The cut is, and to really put in perspective, right? There was a sequel to the Silence of the Lambs, and in it, Hannibal Lecter is talking to someone, and he explains how he's talking about harming people, and he says when you go to harm someone, right, and you have a knife, people are like, oh, you're just gonna stab them, right? You stab them you stab them, right? And he said the reality is if you take a knife and you reach under, right, you reach down to the back of the leg, the back of the human leg, and he says if you slice, there's a tendon there, right? If you slice this tendon there, basically, because of gravity and the placement of this cut at the back of the human leg, which is incredibly difficult to get to, right? He's like, you have to reach between the legs, right, to get there, right? But he said, if you make this cut, the person will bleed out so fast, it will stagger you to see it. Like, it's the most effective cut you can possibly make, right? But it's non-intuitive, right? You have to reach down under. It's incredibly difficult to get to, but if you make this cut and you make it well, the blood that is going to come from this cut, it just gushes, right? And it's devastating. It'll drop a person in seconds, right? And he explained it. That's what's happened with the loss of the American blockbuster. I don't think people have any idea the revenue that's going to be lost, the incredible revenue and profit that's going to be lost, the cultural impact for Americans that is not going to be there, that's going to be, displaced, right? And I'm just like, it is so devastating and harsh that I think we will be unpacking the death of the American blockbuster for decades. People just don't have any idea how bad this is going to be, right? Now, why is that? Well, here's the thing, okay? For one, the American blockbuster has existed for 100 years, okay? It is, the American blockbuster is an American element that has existed for an entire century. Right? And the reality is, it's just, when you look at it, it is hard to even put in perspective how much is being lost, right? So we did talk about the money, right? And let's just talk about the industries, right? The candy industry, the furniture industry, the plumbing industry, right? Because you have these theaters. There's thousands of them. There are thousands of these theaters all over the country, right? They needed seats. They needed, a place to sell the popcorn, right? There was just so much furniture in every single movie theater. Not only did it have to be created, but it had to be maintained, right? Places would replace their entire seating structures, right? Every single one had men's and women's bathrooms. Every single American theater had, plumbers who would come out and just take care of all the pipes, make sure everything was good, right? So you had the furniture industry, you had the plumbing industry, you had the candy industry, right? And this is aside from, so these are all the industries that are going to be massively impacted. Upholstery, you had to upholster, right? Those seats, you had to take care of things in these places. This was not a small thing. It was a very, very big deal, right? And the reality is, it's just hard to put into perspective how much local commerce came from theaters. The screens themselves, they were like 30 by 20, right? There was all of that, the infrastructure, just the scaffolding, all of it. The thousands of theaters that were open. In addition to that, you had, some of them had brick on the front, carpentry, right? This is all the industries where the money, right, that these theaters would spend is now just gone, disappeared, poof, right? It's just confetti in the wind, right? These were real jobs for real local people, and guess what? All these jobs, these could be done by people often, not everyone, but a large portion of them were jobs where you didn't need a college degree. You know how rare those are today? They're virtually, and so just hundreds of thousands of jobs are going to be directly impacted, right? And, and so not only did you have, that candy industry who, would sell the candy, but even just little convenience stores. And there were convenience stores that made a fortune because they were, located a quarter mile from a movie theater, and and there was that age-old, precious American tradition of sneaking your candy into the movie theater, and the movie scene. It is hard to even explain how deep this goes. It is staggering to imagine, everything that's been lost. It's just this is such a deep cut on America, and I'll tell you right now, it ain't gonna get replaced. No streamers are going to help these industries. These industries are going to be devastated by the loss of thousands of local theaters, that were there to give America commerce and people who didn't have, big high-end degrees. They weren't knowledge workers. They had jobs in these industries, and they're gone, right? And they ain't never coming back. They ain't never coming back. I'm calling it. I'm telling you right now. In my opinion, definitely American Blockbuster is massive, and it's going to take a while to even see the shape of what this has caused. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.